Good evening, and welcome to Nox Historia. Tonight, we travel to the world of the classic Maya. Settle first. There is no distance to cover and nothing at all to carry. Let the bed take your weight. Let your jaw come loose. Your shoulders can slide down away from your ears, and your breathing out can run a little longer than your breathing in. That is all tonight asks of you. We are going to a single evening in the year 700 in the rainforest of what is now northern Guatemala. This is the late classic period, the high summer of Maya civilization. Cities have been rising in these lowlands for more than 1,000 years already, and they will go on rising for 200 more. The city we are visiting is called Yax Mutal by the people who live in it. Much later, other people will call it Tikal. And on the throne tonight sits a man named Jasaw Chan K'awiil, who came to power on the 3rd of May, 682, and will rule for 52 years. We know that date, the 3rd of May, because the Maya wrote it down themselves, not from a European chronicler and not from a guess. They had a true writing system, around 800 signs, part picture and part syllable, able to record any sentence anyone could say aloud. They are the only people of the ancient Americas who could do that. And for centuries, almost nobody alive could read a word of it. Then, in 1952, a Russian scholar named Yuri Knorozov worked out that many of the signs spelled sounds. And in 1960, an American named Tatyana Proskuryakov noticed that the dates carved on the stone monuments clustered inside single human lifetimes, and understood that these were not prophecies and not star charts. They were biographies, births, accessions, deaths, real people with names. Today, scholars can read something like 85 to 90% of what survives. Tonight, then, we are not walking into an anonymous ruin. We are walking into a city whose king we can name on an evening we can place to the year. You do not need to remember any of this. If you happen to fall asleep, that is exactly what this is for. So, let us go there. We arrive in the last hour of the afternoon along a raised roadway of packed limestone rubble, white as bone and slightly soft underfoot. On either side, the forest stands up in a green wall. Ramon trees, sapodilla, mahogany, and the great buttressed sabres that everyone here regards as more than trees. The air is warm and thick and smells of wet leaf and wood smoke together. Somewhere above us, unseen, a flock of parrots is settling for the night with a great deal of opinion about it. And then the canopy thins, and ahead of us, above the treetops, the roofcombs appear. Pale stone crests, standing clear of the green, catching the last of the low sun. They were plastered white once and painted red, and even now, weathered, they hold the light longer than anything else in the landscape. This place is not the capital of a Maya empire. There was never any such thing. What we call the Maya were never one state under one crown. They were dozens of kingdoms, sharing a language family, a calendar, a script, and a set of gods, and quarreling with each other more or less permanently, the way the Greek cities did. Yax Mutal is one of the largest. Away to the north, 3 days' walk, lies K'awiil, the snake kingdom, seated at Calakmul, its great rival. Each has its own emblem glyph, a little badge of a sign that means, in effect, Holy Lord of this place and no other. We pass the first houses now, and the city begins without any wall to announce it. Maya cities are not compact. They spread. Clusters of dwellings raised on low platforms, threaded through gardens and orchards and stands of cultivated trees, so that the whole thing is somewhere between a city and an immense inhabited grove.
Only in the center does the ground turn to pavement. There the plazas are surfaced in lime plaster, poured and burnished until they shine, and gently sloped so that every drop of rain runs off into reservoirs cut into the ridge. There are no rivers here. Everything the city drinks in the long dry season, it caught and kept in the wet one. Well over 900,000 cubic meters of it across the whole system. For a long time, nobody knew how big all this really was. Then, in 2018, an airborne laser survey stripped the forest canopy away digitally across 2,144 square kilometers of this landscape and counted 61,484 ancient structures underneath it. Causeways, terraces, house platforms, whole neighborhoods nobody had ever stood on. The lowlands were not scattered settlements in a wilderness. They were full. We come into the open market ground in the last of the light, and it is thinning out. Nobody here trades with coins, because there are none. Everything moves by exchange, and by two things everyone agrees to accept: bolts of woven cotton cloth and cacao beans. Cacao is money. It is countable, portable, and wanted everywhere. And in this century it works as currency across the whole lowlands. We know what these markets looked like from an extraordinary piece of evidence at Calakmul, of all places, a building whose walls were painted around the 7th century by tier upon tier of ordinary people handling goods, each one labeled in glyphs with what they deal in: the salt person, the maize gruel person, the tobacco person. Somebody bothered to paint the vendors and to write down their trades. There is nothing else quite like it. Let us walk along the last of the stalls. Here is salt, brought inland from the coast in hard white cakes. Here is obsidian, volcanic glass, black and translucent at the edge, struck into blades sharper than any steel that will exist for 1,000 years. It has come a very long way, from the highlands to the south, and we know exactly which volcano. Every volcanic flow has its own chemical fingerprint, and almost all of this is from a source called El Chayal, 400 kilometers away. Here is jade, in beads and small polished plaques, green going to blue-green, and all of it, every piece of true jade in Mesoamerica, comes from one narrow valley in eastern Guatemala along the Motagua Fault. Here are quetzal feathers, iridescent and absurdly long, and jaguar pelts and pots, and here, in a basket, the cacao itself. Our host is buying some, and we go with her, off the plaza and along a lane between garden walls to a household on the eastern side of the city. What we find is not a house, but a courtyard. This is how Maya families live. 4 or 5 buildings set around a single swept plaza, raised together on one low platform, facing inward. The plaster underfoot is still warm from the day. There is a breadnut tree in one corner, and beneath it, drying on a mat, a spread of chilies. The whole compound holds an extended family, grandparents, married sons, children, and every doorway opens onto this same shared square of evening air.
Step up into one of the buildings. The walls are pole and mud plaster, whitewashed. The roof is steep thatch, so steep that rain has no time to soak it. It goes up into darkness above the crossbeams, where herbs and cobs of seed maize hang curing in the smoke. Along one wall runs a low masonry bench, and that bench is nearly all the furniture there is. It is a seat, a work table, and later tonight it will be a bed. Under the floor, where you are standing, the family's dead are buried, grandparents, great-grandparents, kept in the house rather than sent away from it, so that the household never quite loses anyone. Almost everything we know about ordinary Maya life comes from one improbable place.
In El Salvador, around the year 600, a small farming village called Seren was buried under meters of volcanic ash, quickly enough to preserve everything, slowly enough that the villagers seemed to have got out. Beneath the ash, houses with their thatch intact, kitchen gardens still planted in rows, pots with food left in them, a sweat bath, a field of manioc. Almost every other Maya site tells us about kings. Seren tells us about supper. The kitchen is a separate building, and it is the warm one. In the middle of the floor sit 3 stones set in a triangle with a fire banked low between them. 3 hearthstones, the commonest arrangement in the Maya world, and also, in the stories, the shape of creation itself. 3 stones set down at the start of the present age. Every kitchen is quietly a model of the cosmos, which nobody here would find remarkable. Beside the fire stands a pot of maize that has been simmering in water and white lime, and this is the most important piece of technology in the household. Soaking maize in lime or in wood ash does something no amount of grinding can do. It unlocks the niacin in the grain, which the body otherwise cannot reach, and improves the protein besides. Without it, a people living almost entirely on maize would sicken. With it, they thrive. This is a chemistry nobody here can explain, and everybody here performs perfectly every evening. The softened grain is ground on a stone, back and forth, into dough. Some becomes flat cakes cooked on a clay griddle. Tonight, mostly, it becomes tamales, dough folded around beans or squash seeds or a little turkey, wrapped in leaves and steamed in a covered pot. Tamales are the everyday food of this world, and they turn up everywhere in the art, heaped on plates in painted scenes, offered to gods, carried in bundles. Supper comes out into the courtyard as the light goes. Tamales, unwrapped hot from their leaves, black beans, squash, chili ground with tomato, some avocado. There is no wheat, no rice, no dairy, no sugar in any of it, and yet almost every ingredient on this mat is one you could buy tomorrow, because the Maya lowlands and their neighbors gave the world maize, beans, squash, chili, tomato, vanilla, and one more thing still to come. A lamp is lit, a little dish of pitch pine, or a wick in oil, and set on the bench, and the courtyard shrinks to the size of its light. Now the cacao. The beans have been fermented, dried, roasted, and ground. The paste is mixed with water and flavored, perhaps with vanilla, perhaps with chili or honey, or the flour they call ear flour. There is no sugar, so it is not sweet the way you know it. It is dark and faintly bitter, and it warms. Then comes the making of it. The drink is poured from a raised vessel down into a lower one in a long, thin stream, and then poured back again and again until a thick foam builds on top. The foam is the point of the whole business, and it goes to whoever is being honored. A painted cup made within a few decades of tonight, the vase now in Princeton, shows a woman doing exactly this, standing, pouring from a height, the froth rising.
And we know the vessels were for chocolate because they say so. In 1984, at Rio Azul, not far north of here, archaeologists opened a 5th century tomb and found a lidded jar with a screw top painted with glyphs. The epigrapher David Stewart read one of them as cacao. Residue from inside the pot was sent to a laboratory, and the chemists found theobromine and caffeine, which in the ancient Americas can mean only one thing. The pot said it held chocolate, and the pot was telling the truth, the label and the contents agreeing across 1,500 years. Someone in the courtyard is working while the rest of us drink.
He is a painter of pots, and in this world that means he is also a scribe, because the two skills are the same skill. He is turning a cylinder vase on his knee, drawing a band of glyphs around its rim with a brush of animal hair. The text is almost always the same kind of thing. This is the drinking cup of so-and-so for cacao. He works in slip, colored clay thinned like ink, and his line does not waver. When Maya art was first studied, the assumption was that the inscriptions were mystical, the calendar obsessive, the whole civilization lost in contemplation of time. The decipherment turned up something nobody expected, a world of named individuals with signatures and job titles. Painters signed their pots, sculptors signed their monuments. This man's name may well be somewhere in the band he is drawing now. The household settles by stages. Children are gathered up. The lamp is moved indoors. Hammocks are slung, or mats unrolled onto the bench and the floor, and thin cotton blankets shaken out. The nights here are warm, but never quite still, and there is nothing to keep out but insects and the damp. Somebody banks the fire. Somebody sets the grinding stone where it will be wanted in the morning. Somewhere across the compound, an old woman is telling one of the children something in a low voice, and it goes on a little after the child has stopped answering, which is how those stories usually end. Let us step out into the courtyard one last time, into the cooler air. The plaster underfoot has given up the day's heat now. The forest beyond the compound has changed hands. The parrots are done, and the night creatures have taken over. Cicadas in long overlapping waves, a howler monkey somewhere far off, sounding like weather. Above the trees, the roof combs of the great pyramids are just visible, blacker than the sky. In 30 decades' time, a new pyramid will be raised on the north side of that plaza, over the tomb of the king who is sleeping in the palace tonight. Temple 1, as we will number it, 47 meters high, built by his son. In the tomb they will lay him with jade and shell and a necklace of 114 beads, and it will stay sealed and undisturbed for 1,200 years. Now look up. The sky over the Paten, with no light anywhere in the world to spoil it, is not a scattering of stars. It is a crowded thing, and the Milky Way stands across it like a road or like a tree. And these people are watching it night after night and keeping count. They tracked Venus, the morning and evening star, through a cycle of 584 days, when the true figure is 583.92. That is an error of under 2 hours per cycle, worked out with no lens of any kind. A later Maya book, the one now in Dresden, carries a Venus table with the corrections written in, and an eclipse table running 405 lunar months ahead. They counted in 20s, with a bar for 20, a dot for 1, and a shell for 0. A true 0, invented here, independently, centuries before it reached medieval Europe.
And they kept the great count of days. Every day since a fixed starting point far in the past has its own number, unbroken, running forward, which is why the carved dates on the stele in the plaza can be converted digit for digit into our own calendar. You may have heard that this calendar predicted the end of the world in December 2012. It did not. That date was simply the end of a large round number of days, an odometer rolling over. Only 2 ancient texts mention it at all, and both use it the way we might say by the turn of the century, a distant marker dropped into the middle of some entirely local piece of business. One last thing, and it is the one most worth carrying into sleep. There is a story that the Maya vanished, that they built all this and then mysteriously disappeared. They did not.
In the 9th century, for reasons still argued over, the great southern cities, including this one, lost their kings, their monuments, and most of their people. But the north went on flourishing. Chichen Itza rose after this city fell, and the people themselves never went anywhere at all. Somewhere between 7 and 11 million Maya are alive today in Guatemala and Mexico and Belize and Honduras, speaking around 30 Mayan languages, 22 of them officially recognized in Guatemala alone. The children in this courtyard have descendants. Some of them still grind maize with lime, and still eat tamales steamed in leaves, and still call the drink cacao. The old woman's story, the one that trailed off, was probably a version of the oldest one they have, the tale of two brothers who go down into the underworld, outwit its lords, and come back up to become the sun and the moon, and of their father, the maize god, who is buried and cracks open and rises again as a young man with a green shoot for a headdress. It was written down in the highlands nearly 9 centuries after tonight as the Popol Vuh, but the painters of this generation are already putting the maize god on their plates, rising out of a split turtle shell with his arms lifted, and so we know the story is far older than the book. A people who lived by maize told a story in which people are made of maize and buried their dead under the floor and expected them, like the grain, to come up again. Let it all go soft now. The lamp is out. The fire is banked to a dull red under its 3 stones. The plaster courtyard is cooling. Above the roofcombs, Venus is exactly where the astronomers said it would be, as you, perhaps, are sleeping now. So let go of the last of it, whatever you are still holding. Sleep well, and when you are ready to travel again, Nox Historia will be waiting. Good night.